Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. On the 3rd day of July 2022, I'm David Percy, and I'll be hosting today's show. And up first, fire danger graphic. Not a lot of change from yesterday. Still Susitna Valley, mostly very high in the fire danger range there, and then down into the Kenai Peninsula, high to very high fire danger, Anchorage area as well. And Copper River Basin has some extreme fire danger surrounded by very high. And then, of course, central interior and then up over the Yukon Flats, seeing extreme fire danger with quite an area of very high fire danger extending westward there to the Yukon River and into the at least eastern or areas of the Kobuk Valley and Koyukuk Valley. Also the North Slope, looking at some very high fire danger there on the central North Slope areas. Otherwise, the southwest interior, pretty cloudy and cool with continuous rainfall going right up across the western Seward Peninsula there into Kodiak Island and southern Kenai Peninsula. So low fire dangers there, and not too bad over the southeast coast as well. And from there, looking at the outlook or the update, red flag warnings continue over the interior due to the widespread lightning with thunderstorm activity and the dry conditions up there. Areas of smoke again across the interior, kind of the same thing we've seen. Conditions much better for south central and the panhandle, of course, with the southeasterly flow, keeping that smoke on the other side of the Alaska Range where it belongs. And then much cooler conditions and wetter around Bristol Bay in the southwest interior there. Outlook, widespread lightning again in store for Monday for the interior. And of course, always be careful lighting those fireworks off. One spark could start a pretty rapidly spreading fire under these conditions, especially if there's any wind at all. And for the satellite imagery, seeing a lot of clear skies again over the south central Alaska and northern Cook Inlet to the Susitna Valley. Had some variable mid and high level clouds in over Anchorage, and that kind of thickened up as you head south on the Kenai Peninsula down to Kodiak there and over the southwest interior. But some clearing showing up around Kodiak Island there, that low center off to the east now. Rain, fog, and drizzle, that all tapering off on the east side of Kodiak Island. The sunshine breaking out in the northwest flow. Looks like southern Shelikof Strait in toward Akiak and those areas there. Not too bad. Sitkinak, mostly sunny this afternoon. Also Prince William Sound, Copper River Basin, just about nothing but sun. Convection firing up again there over the upper Tanana Valley and 40 Mile Country. Still a line of that scattered convection sending northwestward all the way across the Koyukuk Valley, around Bettles, up across the western Brooks Range to the western Arctic coast, but not quite as widespread as it was yesterday in those areas. And you can see that front hung up across the southwest part of the state. That moved in fact, just really a boundary between the cooler air to the west and the warmer air to the east and northeast. And southeast flow line parallel to the wind flow, so not moving a whole lot. It did come inland, though, and over the Seward Peninsula, and that's pushing east of Kodiak Island now, becoming quite weak. Otherwise, fair day over the Panhandle with some sunshine there and light winds and areas of rain and fog. Pretty unsettled out over the Bering Sea with surges of moisture moving eastward, now westerly flow that approaches the coast and then kind of splits, with one branch of the wind flow moving to the north and northwest and the other branch diving southeastward across the Alaska Peninsula. So that moisture as it comes in will be sheared apart again and really not make much eastward headway beyond the coastline, with that next surge coming in to the Pribilofs tonight. That'll hit the southwest coast late tonight and then just fall apart tomorrow as another system develops farther out to the west. On the chart today, you can see that warm front spreading rain into the Pribilof Islands, with the cold front extending back to the southwest there with rain from Shimi and Attu to Amchitka Island. Basically cloudy, though, for the remainder of the Aleutians. Areas of fog, especially the eastern Bering Sea as well. Not much clearing out there at all. Areas of rain continued over the southwest interior, starting to let up now over Bristol Bay. And as I said, in Kodiak Island, with weak high pressure trying to build up into that area between the low center there off to the east of Kodiak and the incoming system out over the western Bering. Otherwise, thunderstorms over the interior today, with temperatures rising into the lower to mid-80s once again by midday over the upper Yukon Valley, around 80 into the Fairbanks area, 79 at Eagle, down a few degrees from yesterday at this time, and also 70s south central Alaska, northern Cook Inlet, and then cooler down to the south now, about upper 60s or mid-60s to lower 70s over the central Kenai Peninsula area. And for tonight, thunderstorms will linger through the night over the mountainous terrain of the interior there, and possibly even to the western Arctic coast, eastern Brooks Range area, and start to diminish there over the mountainous terrain of the upper Tanana Valley areas, and probably losing it altogether for the Alaska Range, eastern Alaska Range. Mostly clear for the Copper River Basin, and dry for the Panhandle, maybe a chance of a shower or two over the southern southeast coast. And still a risk of a shower for the Kodiak Island area, but that a lot less than it has been. And you can see the front there crossing the Pribilos. It's really starting to weaken, but all the moisture associated with it should spread some light rain, fog, or drizzle, or one of the three, across Nunivak Island and in close to the Yukon Delta coast, and that'll extend down into the Fox Islands. Next warm front spreading rain into the western Aleutians, spreading toward Adak late tonight. Low clouds and fog possible along portions of the Arctic coast. Other areas up there won't see anything at all. But again, that thunderstorm threat continues to the west side. And for tomorrow, look for thunderstorms to develop over much of interior Alaska, from the Alaska Range northward and westward to the lower to mid Yukon River Valley areas, and back up into the western Brooks Range area. Anywhere along the Brooks Range that has enough moisture, probably you'll see some thunderstorm development there. Eastern Alaska Range areas and the mountains northeast of up toward Chena, northeast of Fairbanks there, White Mountains on up into the Yukon Flats over toward Eagle and Koyukuk Valley. Chance of thunderstorms once again. Pretty moderate rain showers might kick off over the central and southern Kuskokwim Valley to the western Alaska Range, as well as up over Kotzebue Sound and the Seward Peninsula there. Otherwise, mostly sunny, south central Alaska. Day much like today, maybe a few less clouds though, especially over the southern Kenai Peninsula. Partly to mostly sunny there. Kodiak Island, partly to mostly sunny. Temperatures a little warmer, and looks like the North Gulf Coast looking really good for the 4th of July. And again, really the interior about more of the same. And the Panhandle more of the same, maybe low clouds, fog, and drizzle early on along the coast. Risk of some thunderstorm activity over toward the eastern border. Next system spreading rain eastward to Adak tomorrow. Next system coming in. That should hold together a little better than that previous one as it moves east-northeastward. And we'll see it does just that for Tuesday. Spreads rain into the southwest coast during the latter part of the afternoon northward to St. Lawrence Island. That moves across the Pribilofs Monday night and early Tuesday, starting to taper off late in the afternoon there, with the westerly flow behind the front pushing it eastward. And looks like rain spreading over the Alaska Peninsula into the Bristol Bay area. Otherwise, interior Alaska, not much change. Highs in the mid-80s, Copper River Basin, 80 to 85 eastern interior, and lower 80s for the Susitna Valley and inland areas of the Kenai Peninsula. Showers for the Panhandle. Lows tonight in the 50s for the southeast coast, and 50s to lower 60s interior Alaska, 40s out over the Bering Sea, mid to upper 30s for the central and eastern Arctic coast. Highs tomorrow in the 80s, north and east of the Alaska Range there over the eastern interior, all the way down to the Copper River Basin, mid-80s. Haines, Skagway looking at highs in the mid-80s, lower 80s down toward Juneau, 70s elsewhere, over the southeast coast, and upper 40s to lower 50s out west, followed by lows Tuesday morning, 30s, upper 30s, or 30s to lower 40s for the Arctic coast, and 55 to 60 over the northeast interior, upper 40s to mid 50s south central Alaska, near 50 out toward the western interior, upper 40s for the Bering Sea and Alaska Peninsula. And highs Lower 80s to Sitna Valley, mid 80s Copper River Basin northward to the Yukon Flats.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Look for IFR along the Arctic coast Monday morning with VFR over the North Slope and much of interior Alaska. Marginal VFR pushing northeastward into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, western Alaska Range, with IFR from the eastern Kuskokwim Bay area down across Togiak, Dillingham, and Bristol Bay. IFR covering just about all the Bering Sea and the Aleutians with some marginal VFR and VFR for the Alaska Peninsula. IFR, northern Kodiak, Fognak Islands, across the Gulf, but staying mostly off the coast, but the marginal VFR, Kamishak, Kachemak Bay, southern Kenai Peninsula, North Gulf Coast, Yakutat, and then along the coast of the Panhandle, otherwise VFR for the inside waters. For the afternoon, that area pulls back off the coast, so good VFR for the Panhandle, and VFR eastern interior all the way up to the North Slope, western Arctic coast, central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast, marginal VFR, and then some marginal VFR and across Norton Sound, southern Seward Peninsula, eastward into the Kuskokwim Valley to the Alaska Range. IFR along the southwest coast of the Bering Strait, covering all of the Aleutians, Bering Sea, Alaska Peninsula, mostly marginal VFR. Marginal VFR east side of Kodiak Island on up into across the Barrens and the southern Kenai Peninsula area. And then for the morning Tuesday, nothing but IFR out west, pushing into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, Bristol Bay as well, western Seward Peninsula, and then the central and eastern Arctic coast, also IFR now in over the southern Panhandle and right along the coast, and then that area of IFR barely reaching the North Gulf Coast, southern Prince William Sound, but marginal VFR, Kenai Peninsula, and Cook Inlet across Prince William Sound to Yakutat. And for the afternoon, IFR right along the southeast coast, VFR inside waters, VFR North Slope, Brooks Range, southward to Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, some marginal VFR, Chiniak, Marmot Bay down to Sitkinak, otherwise Shelikof Strait, Fognak Island up into Cook Inlet, good VFR. And then IFR still covering all the Bering Sea, kind of a big broad brush out there, and the Aleutians, as well as the Pribilofs to the western Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay marginal VFR, and got marginal VFR up to the Kuskokwim Mountains now, and into the Kobuk Valley, westward to Kotzebue. Marginal VFR for the Arctic coast with some IFR there on the west side. Passes, Anatuvik, VFR, same forecast for Adigan. No change in these passes from yesterday or the day before. All of them VFR, western Alaska Range, Lake Clark, Merrill, good VFR. Rainy, VFR. Windy, VFR. Isabel, VFR. And Mentasta looking good. VFR flying again. Tanita, good VFR. Portage, VFR on either approach. And Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels out west, we've got it running 6,000 to 14,000 feet there across the western Bering Sea to the central Aleutians. Otherwise, about 10,000 feet, call it 9 to 10,000 feet over the west and southwest interior Kodiak Island, and 10 to 11,000 feet over the eastern interior and the Panhandle. Icing, some scattered areas of mixed icing over the interior due to convection, and then the remains of that frontal boundary there, western Cook Inlet on up to the northwest coast, Seward Peninsula area, Kotzebue, and another weakening band of moisture bringing an icing threat to the St. Lawrence Island area, southwest coast, on down to the Alaska Peninsula. A new batch of much heavier icing, areas of considerable moderate, moving into the southwest Bering Sea and the western Aleutians, but staying west of Adak through tomorrow. Jet stream, increasing wind flow here across the Bering Sea, as you can see, 70 to 90 knots out of the west, and then turning northwest, continuing to dive southeastward there across the Alaska Peninsula, southwest of Kodiak Island, and at 9,000 feet, southwest 40 knots, western Aleutians, westerlies 40 across the southern Bering Sea, turn northwest at 40 across the Alaska Peninsula, south 25 knots there across Kotzebue, 3,000 feet, 35 knot west-southwesterlies, western Aleutians, otherwise pretty light over mainland Alaska, the Gulf, and the Panhandle, again about 20 knots for the Alaska Peninsula and just south of the Pribilofs. And for turbulence, maybe some isolated moderate chop there for Kodiak Island and the Aleutian Range, Kamishak Bay. And then isolated moderate from Adak westward to Shimia and Attu. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining us once again is Eric Stevens, our good friend from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at UAF. And thanks for joining us, Eric. Really appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here, Dave.
And we love to hear about all the fascinating developments, new and old, and how we're using the tools here, especially around Alaska. And I've got to think that, satellite meteorology right now is a fascinating time to be involved in. If we go back to the first satellite, Tyros, back in 1960, I think is when we got some of those first pictures. Weather and meteorology probably changed that day for a whole lot of people, and it's still changing today, right?
Oh, you know it. Satellite imagery is so important, and it's getting better all the time. Yeah. Of course, never perfect, but especially for us in Alaska, where there are other data sets like radars and weather balloons are so thinly spread. Right. The satellite is the great equalizer because the satellite sees everything.
Right.
Yeah. Right. We've got one particular issue in volcanic ash detection.
That's a big deal here. Yeah.
You know it. If you fly an airplane into volcanic ash, your jet engine might just fail. And an airplane without engines is in a world of hurt. Sure. So if there's a volcano that goes off, satellite imagery is the way to track that plume of ash and to tell pilots this is where you need to not be to avoid this ash plume. And there's a phrase out there, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Okay.
Well, it turns out, what we're going to discuss today, that the difference is everything. There's a technique called channel differencing.
Okay.
That if you take one piece of the spectrum of what the satellite detects and a slightly different wavelength of that spectrum, even though those two images might look similar, magical things happen when you subtract one from the other. And they reveal information that was already there, but it was hard to find until you did that subtraction.
That sounds like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure when he's got those fancy glasses and he's flipping one up and back and forth. I mean, is this what we're talking about?
Let's go more highbrow and talk Michelangelo.
Oh,
so apparently Michelangelo made some amazing sculpture, and someone said, Michael, that's amazing. How did you do it? And Michelangelo's reply allegedly was, well, in that rock, the statue was already in there.
Right.
I just scraped away the unnecessary bits. In satellite meteorology, sometimes there are meteorological features that are in the data, but you can't see it until you combine or difference some of the channels.
Okay.
And we've got a case, good old Pavlov volcano goes off now and then.
Sure.
And you can observe directly a picture of the volcano. Just take it with your iPhone. You can see a volcano going
erupting.
off. Right. But if you want to get the broad view, we need satellite to do that. Now, there are a couple of wavelengths that we can look at. So what's a wavelength? That's the amount of space between a peak and a valley and another peak in a certain part of the electromagnetic spectrum. We're going to look at 12 micron wavelength and 10.8 micron wavelength.
What is a micron?
So what's a micron? Yeah, we're getting into the geek department now. A micron is a unit of length, and it is quite tiny. We're looking at what's called long wave wavelengths.
Okay.
But it takes 25,000 of these microns to make an inch. A human blood cell is about 5 microns across. So when we're talking about 12 micron imagery as allegedly long wave, well, that's relative.
Pretty short for light.
Yeah, it's other part of the, it's just an expression for the spectrum there.
Okay.
So we can look at a 12 micron image, say a satellite image. At 12 microns, we're seeing a heat signature here, really, and the way this color enhancement works is the yellow and the red stuff is high cold clouds down here over the Gulf of Alaska into South Central. And if you were asked, where do you find the volcanic ash plume in this image?
Hey, where do you find the volcanic plume in this image?
It's hard to do. I'm not sure I could find it. If you were to look at this image and just say, show me what jumps out at you here, I'd say, well, nothing really. Well, let's look. So 12 micron doesn't help us. Let's look at 10.8 microns.
All right.
All right, look at that. It's practically the same image. So where's this volcanic ash? Can't find it at 12 microns, can't really see it at 10.8, but when we subtract one channel from the other, magically, the plume appears. The color enhancement here highlights the ash in blue.
Wow.
The information was already there, but we couldn't find it until we subtracted one channel from another.
Very interesting.
It's almost magical. Similarly, let's say you're looking for fog up on the north slope. It's kind of a foggy neighborhood.
Sure.
In 11 micron and 3.9 micron, we've got a 3.9 micron image here. It's a big fuzzy blur over Barrow. We can't see where the fog is. But the information is lurking in there waiting for us to reveal it. All we have to do is find that difference between the 11 micron and the 3.9, and then this image becomes this image, and the fog bank jumps right out, and you can see it up there at Barrow. Now, you got to choose the right tool for the job.
Sure.
Like they say, you open your toolbox, all kinds of stuff in there. What do we need for this particular task? If you want to find volcanic ash, we look at 12 and 10.8 micron, find that difference. If you want to find fog, we'll look at 11 and 3.9 micron, find that difference. It's great, different tools for different jobs. Of course, there's always caveats and gotchas, but this fog procedure, it only works at night, because when the sun comes up, it gets in the way. So every product has its strengths and limitations, and in meteorology, the challenge is using the right tool for the right job, and these are some of those tools.
And discovery is still happening, even with meteorology. The weather's been around for a long time, but the tools that are being developed to understand the meteorology is fascinating and still very new science.
It's such a young science. We've come so far, and I'm getting old enough now that I can literally say that, you know, when I was a boy, we didn't have this kind of thing. And there's new things happening all the time. New satellites will be launched in coming years that will have better instruments than ever before. It's an exciting time, and this is so helpful for Alaska because satellites help fill in the gaps between other ways of observing the weather. Satellites, the great equalizer for Alaska.
Yeah, and help so many people stay safe in so many ways every day up here in the last frontier.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, protecting lives and property.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. We love to hear about this fascinating information, and boy, it just makes me want to go watch satellite pictures all day. So hopefully we're inspiring more people to do the same thing, and just be curious. It's a wonderful thing. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Coastal water forecast for the Panhandle. Along the coast, south coast, northwest winds 10 to 15 knots, seas 5 feet. For the north coast, west-northwest at 15 knots, seas 5 feet. Lincoln Glacier Bay, north winds 15 knots. Stevens Passage, winds will be out of the north at 15 knots and 10-knot northwest breeze for Clarence Strait from the northwest. And for the day Tuesday, Clarence Strait, south winds 10 knots, Stevens Passage, southeast winds at 10 knots, and the Lynn Canal area looking at a south wind at 10 knots with pretty low seas across the entire inside channel area. For the outer coastline there, northwest winds 15 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet. And moving on to Prince William Sound, Monday, southwest winds 10 knots, seas 2 feet. North Gulf Coast, west-southwest winds 15 knots, seas 4 feet. West winds 15 knots for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay. South winds 10 to 15 knots with 3-foot seas for Cook Inlet. And for Tuesday, south to southwest winds 15 knots for Cook Inlet, seas 4 to 5 feet. For the Kamishak Bay area, winds will be out of the west at 20 knots and south 20 for the Barren Islands. Light variable winds in the forecast for Tuesday for Prince William Sound with 2-foot seas. And for the North Gulf Coast, southwest winds 15 knots with 4-foot seas. Kodiak Island, southwest winds 20 knots, seas 5 feet. For the Alaska Peninsula, west-southwest winds of 15 knots. And Bristol Bay, winds will be out of the west at 15 knots. And for Tuesday, Alaska Peninsula, southwest winds 15 knots, seas 4 feet. Kodiak Island, southwest winds 15 knots, seas 5 feet. And a southwest wind at 15 knots for Bristol Bay with 2-foot seas. Eastern Aleutians on Monday, southwest winds 15 knots, seas 6 feet. Central Aleutians, southwest 15 to 20 knots with seas up to 7 feet. And for the Western Aleutians, south winds 20 to 25 knots with 8-foot seas. And for Tuesday, out west, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, Central Aleutians, southwest at 20. And the Eastern Aleutians, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, seas running 4 to 8 feet. Pribilof Islands on Monday, southwest winds 15 knots, and for the southwest coast, Winds will be out of the south at 15 knots. South winds 15 for St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island, southeast at 15. Norton Sound looking at a west breeze at 10 knots. And for Tuesday, south winds at 10 knots for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island, seas 2 to 4 feet. And for the southwest coast, winds will be southwest at 10 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas. Pribilofs west 15 knots, 5 foot seas, and St. Matthew Island, winds will be out of the west, or out of the southwest at 15 knots with seas running at 5 feet. For the Arctic coast, look for northeast winds 10 to 15 knots, seas 3 feet in the ice-free waters. From Cape Beaufort to Wales, north winds at 10 knots with 2 foot seas. And for Tuesday, Wales to Cape Beaufort, south winds 15 knots, seas 4 feet. West winds at 10 knots for the western Arctic coast. The central Arctic coast looking at an east wind at 10 knots. And east-northeast winds at 5 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And looking at tonight again, look for low clouds and fog along the Arctic coast. Variably cloudy over the north slope with some scattered thunderstorm activity, especially on the western Arctic coast there. And also over the interior, thunderstorms persisting through the night through much of the central and eastern interior over the mountainous terrain with some showers over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and then kind of a break when then some light rain tries to push onto the coast late tonight with that next front, definitely spreading over the Nunivak Island area. And the Pribilofs, periods of rain, fog, and drizzle, IFR conditions there. That'll extend down to the Fox Islands. And next warm front brings warm front type weather in the form of rain, fog, and drizzle with southwest winds about 15 to 20 knots out to the western Aleutian, spreading into Adak late tonight. Low clouds and fog off the southeast coast. For tomorrow, about the same. Thunderstorms over the interior, highs 70s and 80s. Look for some moderate shower activity into the Kuskokwim Valley. And then more rain coming into the western central Aleutians. That front pushes rain to the southwest coast on Tuesday across the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, the interior, more of the same, a little more in the way of showers and clouds out west and thunderstorms in the central interior. Mostly sunny, highs 70s, lower 80s, south central Alaska, in the 80s over the eastern interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.